Hey, feet fried, Sauron here. I'm just saying that it took me a lot longer than planned to edit this episode just because it was 50 minutes long. And also, like, I think doing assignments just turns your brain into a vegetable, and thinking with a vegetable while editing is not exactly productive, which is why this is a little later than planned. But it's here now. I hope you enjoy it. And Abhijeet is an extremely cooperative guest. It was very easy talking to him, which is sort of saved me the trouble because I'm awkward in some conversations usually. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. It's all about comic books. It's mostly about Angry Maushi and where that comes from. If you haven't checked it out, there's links in the description for it. But I'm not saying that you need to know about it. This is also a good place to come to know about Angry Maushi if you didn't know about it. So yeah, I'm just gonna cue the fucking. There he is. That's great. He'll be recording today.
Awesome.
He is a robot that does not care about my feelings. Anyway, today we have with us Abhijeet Kini. For some reason, I always mess up your name. It is such an easy name.
It is an
Language.
easy name, but then people always somehow end up calling me Abhishek for some reason. I've heard people calling me Abhishek more than what they've called out my real name, and they've messed up my last name big time. In spite of the fact that
Kini.
it's just 4 alphabets. That's it. But the kind of combinations I've heard and I have read myself being addressed have been hilarious. Right from my school days, Kenny, Kini, Kuri. Can you believe that? Kuri.
Wow.
Kenny. So it's like a Kenny G. uh, all the combinations. They've just added more vowels and more alphabets into it. I'm like, how difficult is Kini? But no.
That reminds me of like a time a friend of mine. I forgot her name. It's been a while. It's a very easy name. I think it's Adi or Aditi, either one.
Okay.
And she was named Bindi in like a paper. Like
Okay.
her name was written
How?
Bindi. I have no idea.
You know, the funniest mutation of name. At least the others got the A and K right? Like Abhishek. Kuri still probably is in the distant family of Abhijeet Kini somewhere. The weirdest name that I've seen myself, being addressed with was one courier package I received once, and it literally, I kid you not, it literally read out Mamuji Looney. Mamujee. They at least got the double E right in my name. And Luni. I'm like, ye kaun hai?
How?
I have no idea. I have no idea who typed out that small little, address shit. Mamuji Looney. That was a joke in my family for a long, long time. And obviously, with a name like that.
Brilliant. Oh, by
Yeah.
the way, we're 6 minutes in with tangents, which is great. Best way to start a podcast. It's listed as an educational podcast, by the way. I have no idea what I'm
Oh,
doing.
really? Wow.
Yeah. So today we're talking to Abhijeet, who is a comic book creator. Is that a label you identify with?
Yes, I can say that.
Yeah. And he's been working in comic books since I was 7 years old. And he has created one of my favorite books to come out of the Indian indie scene of comic books called Angry Maushi. And I just wanted to talk to him about it. Beyond which
Awesome.
we'll also like take tangents off of it and sort of explore the broader themes in the
Yes.
thing. So
Yes.
one of the things I really like to do is put guests on the spot and let them introduce themselves, because I always get one detail of their life wrong, which is like horribly wrong. Like Abhijeet becomes a fumble of all names that start with Abhi. So Abhineet, it
There you
happened
go.
again.
You can just call me Kini. That's fine. Let's leave
Okay.
out the 8-letter word.
Okay. Kini, you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah. So I have been in the comics domain since 2004, since I've been drawing for Tinkle. That's how long it's been. I have been, if I may use the word professional illustrator, meaning, published in magazines and newspapers. I started way back in 99, 2000 when I was in my junior college. And comics, cartoons, animation, and humor is something that I, uh, you know, love, creating content for and content based on, and which is how I think, the Comic Con scene has been something that I have really been thankful for, and that's where I get to meet a lot of my readers, um, talk about comics, and basically, yeah, I mean, just kind of hang out and chill, talking about the panels and the speech bubbles. So that's me. Um, Cartoonist at core and comic creator by profession, if I may call it that.
It's super nice that you led into my first point of discussion, and anyway, which is Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got Angry Maushi and met you at the same time at 2016 Pune Comic Con.
Pune Comic Con, yes.
And I was a college student at the time, and I remember I think somebody was writing an article about this. By the way, you Googlers, please don't dox me on basis of what I'm about to say. I bought a Mona Lisa themed Deadpool from you,
Yeah.
which was the best 100 rupees I'd spent that year easily. And along with that,
Yeah, we
I
do
ended up.
these.
Yeah, go ahead.
We do these crazy fan art only for Comic Cons, and that's only where you find it at the stall. And I think you picked it up there when we had it there.
Yeah. And then I picked up Angry Maushi that year because it just looked interesting. And one of the things I really like about doing a podcast with artists is that I usually end up picking up the art that they have the most fun talking about, because I heard your podcast with Books and Beyond. And by the way, this is a tangent, I know, but Books and Beyond, that's a sneaky move, putting a link to your podcast within the Goodreads comment section for the book. That's how I found you. So whoever your marketing team is, it's working. They're doing a good job, and you better give them a bonus this month. Um, so
I really
I
don't know who
remember.
did that, but thank you, whoever did that.
So I remember you said that Angry Maushi was by far, at the time at least, your favorite
Yeah,
character to draw and sort of
yeah, yeah,
explore.
yes.
Do you want to expand as to why that was? Like, why is it that Angry Maushi in particular comes to you as like a unique character or your go-to favorite character that you've drawn?
See, I think whatever I create, all the independent comics that I create are based on real people, real incidents, people around us. I wanted to create something based on Mumbai. Something that represents Mumbai. What would it be? So it's such a mix of various kinds of people, but there's always that angry woman you will find maybe at the market or maybe in the local trains, a fisherwoman, whoever it might be. And there's the entire thing in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, like, Are Maushi, hey, I got. So Maushi and angry put together kind of summed up the Mumbai theme for me, at least the time I was creating the character. So the first Mumbai Comic Con is where me and my wife, we decided we'll do some prints with that face, and that's it. We'll just put it out there, as a set of coasters and posters. People ask, who is Angry Maushi? Is this a character story you have? Is there a theme behind it? And I said that's a good idea. Why don't I make a comic on this? And which is how the following Comic Con the next year, we launched the first Angry Maushi issue. And people, I mean, we got a great response. People said, kind of resonates with the kind of socio-political scene. It's a satire, basically. So for me, she's a super heroine, and I call her a vigil auntie. Because she's fighting crime. She has her way with katanas, guns, pure fists. And at the end of the day, she's wearing a Nawari sari. She can be any woman on the street, and goes, goes great with that saying, which is "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," which is what she is based on. So I love this character, and I think there's so much you can talk about when it comes to Mumbai or even India, the kind of things that we face, the political scenario, the social scenario. So I think she is a woman for all seasons, at least in that department. So I love drawing her, and whenever people ask me for a little doodle on the book, it's always Angry Maushi that I would draw. And I get some crazy commissions also from people at Comic Con to draw angry Maushi, probably beating up the Hulk or something like that. So, so I'm like, why not? Um, so it's always fun, showing like a Nawari clad lady holding a set of katana blades, something as contrasting as that, which is why I love drawing angry Maushi.
Uh, that's one thing that I really liked about how you started your explanation about Angry Maushi is that it's a character that explains Mumbai. And that's
Yeah,
one of the first thoughts that I had about this comic book is that the moment I opened it, the moment I saw the first page where you're
right.
introducing the premise of vigilantes being outlawed,
Yeah,
uh, it sort of instantly reminded me of Jani Bhido Yaro,
sure,
which
sure,
is an extremely Mumbai movie. And of course,
sure.
it very specifically talks about the crumbling infrastructure of Mumbai,
Yeah.
which was made in 1984. And I just like the audience to know that as of 2018 and 2019, uh, public infrastructure related deaths in Mumbai are an yearly thing. So
That's right.
this is a city that suffers the brunt of the corruption of its politicians quite a lot.
That's right.
And I instantly knew that before I even turn the next page that the villain is going to be a minister. And
Yes.
what I really loved about the second page is that the second page knew that I knew that it's going to be a minister as well. And
This is probably the best explanation, the best way of defining how the story has flowed so far.
uh-huh.
I love it. So please go on.
And then I sort of saw the second page and I instantly became clear to me that this is a fairly toothless comic in the sense it's like, but that's not to say that it's harmless. It has fangs
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
um, and the reason I say that is because I'm pretty sure this is a very popular book, and I know that the number 1984 is going to be haunting the listeners' dreams at this point because I said the third time in a span of 5 minutes. But in the 1984 book is written as such that authoritarianism is called out, and no part of the political spectrum can directly claim it. And I feel the same way about this comic book, and the fact that it doesn't take itself seriously is sort of clear on the second panel where Raki Swant is one of your heroes who has no powers. And what's amazing to me, 8 years after the publication of this, she's still doing the same thing.
She
Somehow,
is. Yep. She's going strong, and now she's on Insta, which means she's reaching out to even more people to spread her superpowers.
and the second one that was my favorite is Batsman, who um, spreads his crotch. It's a, it's one masculine power. I do like that. And then moving on, of course, it goes to a very by the numbers plot, but which is hilariously written, which takes me to the third way I saw this, that it's a very Deadpool-ish comic book in the sense
Wow.
you give,
Thank you.
yeah, because I remember you at some point you said that she's getting sugar and water for her
Yeah.
powers, and
Yeah.
then you dismissed it because you have only 20 pages to explain self-publishing is a bitch.
Breaking the fourth wall in that sense, yes. I love doing that, Why should a comic take itself so seriously when it is about being self-aware, when it's about spoofing everything around you? Let us spoof itself, right there. So let it not take it too seriously, but at the same time, kind of put the message out there, this is what it stands for. And seriously, self-publishing is a very, very difficult thing to do, and that was one of my earliest self-published comics. So getting the number of pages right, how much am I spending to print a 1620 pager, color job, etc., etc. And I was like, man, I'm seeing my money fly right now, fly away. That is. So I had to make a joke to kind of, otherwise, I don't want reader to criticize it saying, "Arey, but it was rushed later on." I don't know what the writer just thought. He just rushed through the ending. So I just put it out there. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to write this down in the captions and the narration of the book. Yeah, that's how it works, and which is why it has been rushed in the end, so that people get it. People know what kind of a thought process I have while making it. and which is why I think people um, didn't expect that fourth wall, whatever. But it was not like something that I wanted to do always. It just happened while I was writing this. Why don't I just on these little, small little snippets, small little anecdotes, which kind of get people to think, you know what, it's more self-aware than I think it is.
One of the things that I wanted to ask about is, of course, it sort of goes back to, you know, the angry Maushi is the everyday citizen who's just lost their temper.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
already explained the very vernacular that it comes from. When it comes to
yeah.
characters, were there specific characters that you took inspiration from to create Angry
Hmm.
Maushi? Like, for example, this is completely my personal interpretation. Amitabh Bachchan, the angry young man
Right,
during the 70s, was a
right,
tough time for India, and that's why he sort of
right.
channeled the anger vicariously for a lot of the
Sure,
population.
sure,
So,
sure.
was there a similar character that you saw back to who you channeled your anger through and like sort of mirrored it via?
Not necessarily. I think this she isn't based on any particular character. She's just like an average everyday Indian woman in a green sari. That's it. I didn't base her on anything, but whatever she does and goes through is based on what's happening around us. Uh, and this was in 2012. So 2012 to 2014 is when we launched the 3 issues, which forms what I call the Guns, Fists, and Blades trilogy. I love calling it that because it sounds heavier when I say trilogy. Oh my god! It's just 3 indie books put together, but then we sell these collected volumes a lot, and it sells better. People love collecting the collected volumes more because they get the entire story arc. Um, so that period saw a lot of political things happening around, especially with the uh, say no to corruption, unshans, and these protests that happened. And then there were some very weird political situations that came up. Then there was a little incident where they started digging, a compound of a temple, saying there's gold underneath. That was in Unnao. Uh, so I connected that with they're actually digging deeper. There was no gold search. They were actually digging deeper to go and talk to the devil himself. That was in the second volume, the second issue of the comic. So these things I kind of kept seeing, and I thought, if I have to talk about it through one person, it has to be Angry Maushi. She can get away with it. She's not preachy. She's not one of those Boy Scout or Girl Scout characters which always say, look, children, how it works. She's not that. She's the kind who will show things as it is, and she will probably be like your ego. You want to do something, you'll do it. There are times you say, you know what, Are, I wanted to slap that guy one smart because he was saying like this or misbehaving. We don't do that. She does it, and I think that the character design is not based on any one specifically, but everything she goes through is completely based on whatever is around us. So that is how I would put it.
I just want to point out for anybody who's not from the country that 2012 to 2014 was a very turbulent time in Indian history, especially because we were going through a very strong media fatigue of corruption scams.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what didn't wear off is, of course, this is a little while later. Of course, 2012 is a long time after it, but still, the number of zeros during the 2G spectrum scam were still fresh in my memory at the time. And that is to say this was before the 2014 election, and the government change, and then the government dissent that has risen up in 2019.
Yep.
So what I really like about this is that this comic book sort of survived the test of criticism over an entire government shift, but the problems it addresses are still the same.
Yes, and that is what I'm realizing even now, because I thought after a while that this comic may not age well because people would say, "Arey, this happened back in 12. No, what would I know about it right now?" But politics and governments are something that they are fairly consistent in being what they are. That is giving fodder to creators. You know, consistently doing something to give us all fodder. I may be making comics, you may be making memes and podcasts. Of course, we did the whole session on memes that day, and we had some great conversations there. Uh, no, so what I was saying was there was always something that these politicians would give us, and that's what I'm always thankful for, because there's always some content or the other you can make fun of, and you can make some creation, some kind of storyline out of, and that's exactly what has happened. So the latest Angry Maushi issue that I came out, which was episode 4, if I may call it that, was called Citizen Pain, which I launched earlier this year in Ahmedabad at the Ahmedabad Comic Con. And that has to do a lot with certain things that were happening in our country at that time of the year, where certain citizenship things were brought up, and certain rules and regulations were being protested against, and you know what I'm talking about. So I named it Citizen Pain, and it had to do with this. So my earlier 3 comics, people said that, oh, is this a very political, one-sided political angle you're taking? Are you supporting one political party and going against the other? I'm like, no, I'm just presenting things as they are. So the same people now are saying that, oh, now you're completely against this government as well. And my point is, I'm not against or pro anything. My job as a cartoonist and comics creator is to show things the way they are. And that's how I think a spoof or a satire can be used very effectively to make people more aware.
Mm-hmm. Like
And
that's that.
and the fun part was that comic was launched in Ahmedabad.
For people who don't know, that's the capital of the Is that the no financial capital of the home state of our dear Prime Minister, who cares?
Yes.
Cares only for the money, not for the RTI. Uh, somehow he got away with. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna do a rant on RTI
Yeah, we're not
again.
going there.
We're not going there now. So anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about is that one of the things that you mentioned on the other podcast that I heard you on, and even like your general public appearances, is that in India there's still a notion that does not accept comic books as a medium for the adults.
Yeah, that unfortunately is there.
And while right now that has changed a, a certain amount, I'm not saying that it's still in the mainstream or anything, given like the popularity of Marvel movies. I don't know if you're aware of Rakesh Khanna's work on Tamilian Pulp Fiction.
Blaft, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Like stuff like that has come out, and what really gives me joy is that it survived.
Yeah.
Even it's at least afloat. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Like I think the critical response was great. I don't know anything else about its financial response, but how do you how have you dealt with the fact that your work was being sidelined, given that its genre itself was not comprehended by a larger amount of the public?
See, I think a lot has to do with Comic Cons starting off in India. First of all, it got people more curious about what's happening on the comic scene. People came out and saw that there's content for an older audience as well. Which is why even I and the other guys, who are participating artists at Comic Cons, we can come out with mature content. Of course, we have to put a disclaimer, which I have been putting right from the start. Just like your explicit content sticker on the hip hop CDs or whatever, we do put a little mature audience disclaimer at the bottom. Now, what happens is, for me at least, people know my work more from the tinkle side of things. So they know me more as here's a guy who draws for a children's magazine, which I love doing, by the way. I mean, I love the content we do in Tinkle. But me personally, I have some stories that I want to talk about on my own, which probably might cater to 16 plus or an 18 plus audience. Because of Comic Cons and because of a platform that they're giving us, we get the confidence, to come out with that kind of content and present it to people. About commercial successes, I can't say much, because just selling comics may not earn you the bread and butter you might need for an everyday survival. What it does is it adds a lot of weightage to your showcase, and a lot of credibility to what kind of projects you can take and what kind of stories you can tell. So I'm not aware of the other creators who are coming up with a more mature storyline or a more mature line of content. But me, I would always want satire and socio-political topics to be talked about, and that has to be. Uh, there's always been a void there in that scenario. We've had superheroes, we've had mythology, we've had filmy Bollywood, spin-offs, etc., etc. But socio-political is something that people have not really gone too much into in comics.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is why I thought, let me try this out. It worked, and at least for me and my comics right now, it has worked very well. So, in whatever small circulation or whatever little fan base we have, I my whole aim would be to keep churning out more content for them. However, largely India still considers comics to be for kids, and which is why sometimes you also see in bookshops, retail bookshops, which are still around. I mean, most of them have shut down. They'll just have all their graphic novels and comics mixed up. They'll probably have a Watchmen right next to a like a Disney children's comic or something, because hey, comics, right? So
Yeah.
if it's in panels and speech bubbles, it has to talk to an 8-year-old. That's not the case. So I think that has to change. It's gradually changing.
Mm-hmm.
I do see at Comic Cons the parents who get their kids along get very curious to see, acha, what is this comic about? Why does it have a mature ye on the disclaimer? Oh, is it like this? Is it like that? And they pick it up. That's how awareness builds up, and I think that's a good thing that's happening. So it was all about exposure,
Mm-hmm.
people knowing more about the medium. The movies, of course, Marvel, DC movies, they've had their. I mean, I don't know who they want to cater to. Is it only kids? Is it the adults? I don't know, because everyone seems to be having fun watching them. But I personally would say that there's so much more than superheroes. So there's enough stuff for all age groups out there, and the
Mm-hmm.
Western graphic novel scene though has so much adult material that I must say that whatever I've been seeing off late, all the way DC has gone. DC has always been the
Yeah.
darker of the two. But even Marvel, they've had some really dark storylines, aimed at older, like teens and like 20 somethings and all. So gradually, I think that age group is they're targeting an older age group gradually, and I think it's time that people realize that there's something for everyone, and it's not just like for kids that comics are only for kids. That's a very wrong notion. I really hope that that message catches up very soon with everyone.
Well, just on the front of the message being caught on with everyone, I have a very specific question regarding influence of like Angry Maushi or like the way you do content in general now.
Sure.
Um, so when I was a kid, one of the things that my brother bragged about is catching the Batman animated series in when it was being aired.
Yes, Doordarshan.
Yeah, and one of the things that really hit me about the Batman animated series is that as opposed to the toothless Batman that we got, who was just a brooding gentleman beating up criminals in night, it was an actual animated show that was not afraid of hitting kids
Yeah.
with complex philosophy.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Like going back to this show as an adult, it appears that Bruce Wayne is a genuinely broken and in some places psychotic man who
Yes.
might not be on the right end of things in all areas.
Correct. Correct.
And was that an influence that you had, Batman in specific, or if there's anything else that you want to list?
No, I think my earliest favorites in comics for some reason. I mean, favorites. Okay, I still have my comics from my childhood days. But I loved Green Lantern for some reason. Maybe because there was a ring and they could form anything out of their willpower, etc., etc. But Batman, uh, the single issues that we used to, of course, graphic novels तो तभी थे ही नहीं. It was always these single issues we used to find at bookshops or addiwalas. Um, I kind of noticed the way he was in the comics, and then came the 1960s TV show which was rerun on Star TV when we in the mid 90s,
Mm-hmm.
the Adam West one. And I used to be like, what is happening here? Why is Batman so happy? Why? I mean, even in the 80s, when I was reading the Batman comics, he was, he had dark themes. But the Batman TV show from the 60s was hilarious, and I was wondering
Mm-hmm.
why did they do that? And then late 90s, I mean, mid to late 90s, we had the Batman animated series on TV on Doordarshan, which people still feel, and I agree, is the most definitive Batman stories ever told. And that is when it struck me that a art style doesn't matter. That art style is so pretty. It is not. It doesn't look dark when you see it. Of course, it has that noir feel to it, but the characters are a lot more the way you draw them are a lot more rounder, a lot more geometric than the very serious DC anatomically correct characters. But the darkness, like you mentioned, was more evident in the animated series. I think they got a chance to have to talk about all the characters in much more depth than any other platform that Batman had before that. Also,
Mm-hmm.
it has to do with the reinvention of the graphic novels and the storylines in the Batman mythos after Dark Knight Returns, especially in 1986, where they completely changed Batman, the Batman comics, the Batman tone. After which things got darker, and
Mm-hmm.
from then on, I actually followed the character even more. And I think I actually I got the Dark Knight Returns graphic novel when I was in class 7.
Mm-hmm.
I found it. I mean, I found it at a bookshop, and I pestered my mom to buy it for me. And I still remember back then it was like 80 or $90. I'm talking
Wow.
about 94-ish, 94, 95. That's big money that time. It was pretty expensive, but I loved it wasn't like any of your patla comics. It was a proper graphic novel, and I'm reading it. I'm thinking, it is so violent. Batman looks like a big, buffed up old man. And it's so dark. It's so different than the other comics, Batman comics I'd read. And that slowly, we got the animated series on TV. And I was like, okay, now it connects. They want to change the entire. I was a kid back then. Not that I would have so much of uh, idea of what the writers must be thinking or what the creators must be thinking. But I did realize that this is the Batman we need to follow as a storyline. And it also gave us some great characters. Harley Quinn, by the way, debuted in the animated series. And now she is
Mm-hmm.
one of their, I think, at least in the movie universe, she's one of their best aces when it comes to, spinning money. So I agree. Batman animated series, A, definitive. B, art style wise, I learned a lot through it. And growing up, even now, it's not aged a bit. It still stands strong. It doesn't feel like it's from some other era. And C is that it defines Batman even better. So yes, I think most of my influences creating uh, plots, subplots, or superheroes or something. I keep the animated series right on top.
Well, I will disagree on its aging in one specific bit. Like other things, I agree with you that like it hasn't aged a bit in a lot of ways, especially like visually.
Yeah,
It does not look like it was created years ago.
yeah,
It does look specific to an art style, but like that's understandable.
right, right.
But the hygiene related insults have not aged well.
Meaning?
For example, listen up, scumwad is not a real thing. Batman says. It's, I know it's a very specific nitpick, but it hasn't aged well.
I would take that any day over Burt Ward saying holy ravioli Batman or these things. But I think each of these stand for the era that we were we've been exposed to. It speaks a lot of that. Yeah, but I know the kind of insults that they used to. I think yeah, that kind of speaks of the fact that it's from the 90s. But besides that, I think it's a very well. It's still something that you can watch and understand very well, even if technology has advanced, even if things have changed. they still had that very 50s and 60s vibe to the architecture, the Gothic architecture, the cars. I love the vehicles that they showed in it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
especially the Batmobile. That was one of my favorite Batmobiles. It's just like a very slender, long car, like a machine, and that entire Gothic feel is what I loved about it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that intro animation, that montage remains one of my favorite clips to watch. You know, when I do take a lot of workshops on storyboarding or comics or sequential art. I do take this subject in a couple of colleges as well, and I do keep referencing that introduction montage to show the students, this is an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you introduce a character so well, and in the end it's just a silhouette which is lit up by a lightning strike, but it's so ominous, and
Mm-hmm.
yet that art style is not scary or intimidating. It's smooth. It's how do I put it? Uh it's very geometric is what I would say. Very
Yeah,
unlike,
very.
very unlike your Watchmen. Very unlike even now. Since we are talking graphic novels, like the boys graphic novel is so
Mm-hmm.
detailed, and here is Bruce Timm's version, which is so simple yet so strong.
Just like rectangles lit up by shadows is
Yeah,
like type of
yes,
thing. Yeah, 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 for
correct,
sure.
correct.
Um, I I know I brought up these hygiene related insults, but in contrast to that, one of the favorite things I have and something that helps me keep your comic book fresh in particular is the vocabulary of Maushi. Because
Okay.
right on the front page it says Kaire Melia Tujha Maila. Quintessentially Maharashtrian.
Yes,
And
yes,
like
yes.
not just quintessentially Maharashtrian, frustrated Maharashtrian.
Frustrated Maharashtrian.
I
Yes.
don't care where you're from, like within Maharashtra, if you're frustrated, these words will come to your mouth in like some form.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, recently, last week only, I was on a podcast with a few friends of mine from Bad in Bollywood.
Mhm.
Uh, and we basically what they do is they watch Bollywood movies and they just discuss how
Oh
bad they
yeah,
were.
the one you were talking about, Mohit Suri and Ashiki 2 and all these, right?
Yeah, that's sort
That's the
of like
one.
that's one of the things that they discussed on
Yeah,
it.
it's hilarious by the way.
So, with that in mind, we sort of were completely ready to like criticize this movie called Khaki.
Yeah, yeah.
Not Khaki, sorry, Kante.
Kante,
Kante.
Kante, the Reservoir Dogs
And
of Bollywood.
yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And uh, I was expecting that, you know what? I am so ready to not be into any of this. I was completely ready to hate it. And you know what? We didn't find it as bad. Probably
Right,
our standards were really low for a Bollywood movie
right,
at the time.
right.
But if I watched that in 2003, I would be like, that's pretty good. That's not bad at all.
Actually, yeah. In fact, when I was listening to that podcast, I remembered a few. There was a question that y'all were talking about. If there is a particular movie or a character y'all loved back then and you can't watch now. I remember a number of Akshay Kumar films. Back then when I was in school, Mohara was such a huge deal, man. The movie Mohara, Tu Cheez Badi
Mhm.
Mast. Oh my God, people just, oh kya, what action scenes, and Akshay Kumar and Sunil Shetty were like, Batman v Superman, that level of pitting against each other, two action stars, and then Ravina Tandon, and all this was, and even the action. We used to talk about this in school, like, rent out the VCR, the cassette the previous evening, and watch it at home. Next day in school recess, may you talk about this like probably our podcasts here or any of these YouTube pay review channels. We used to do that. Arey, that fight scene was so sexy and all that. We used to say today when I happened to watch that film some maybe a couple of years ago, and I was like, what the hell is happening here? There is no sense, there's no logic, but it was so cool back then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
for some reason I remembered Mora in that conversation. I thought I'll just bring that up as well.
yeah. I mean, good enough. I just wanted to like. So the reason I brought up Kante is because one of the things that really sold the movie to me is the way Sanjay Dutt used very Mumbai vocabulary in
Yeah,
his Hindi.
yeah.
Like, for example, the word "dao," which was a very aggressively
Yeah.
2000s word. to
Yes, yes, yes.
misogynistically refer to your
Yes.
romantic interest.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the same thing happens in your comic book, but on an infinitely better level, because um, even though I would prefer kande pohe, the batate pohe sold me. I chuckled at that. Uh, Same with the fact that you were confident enough to put Ais Havya in the back of the book, which is Marathi
Yeah.
for motherfucker for people who don't speak
Yeah. Yeah.
Marathi. So how is it that you decide the vocabulary for a character like Angry Maushi in any other context as well? You can talk about fanboys if you want, because that has a very specific um, vocabulary you use as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, you got an issue of fanboys as well, I guess. It was
Uh,
there at the. Was it there at the Pune Comic Con?
it was there, but I ended up buying only Angry Maushi.
Ah, okay. No, so fanboys is a very different. I mean, it doesn't have a very specific city or a country it's based out of. It's very generic that way. Even the names are very generic, J, K, and M, and all that. For Maushi, I wanted to do some method acting based kind of method creation. So if she's like an angry Mumbaikar, she will definitely speak the way she speaks. Also, it has to do with the fact that in my school, we there was Marathi medium and English mediums running simultaneously on the same floor. So our recess time, we used to hang out and speak. So they used to have very creative Marathi expletives. The kids back in my school days,
Mhm.
and I learned a lot there from them, from conversations with them. Even one PT teacher of ours, and if I may use the words here, I don't know.
Go ahead.
One PT teacher of ours, okay? PT teachers, they are not usually, they're supposed to be like all strict, and people are supposed to fear them and all that. But she saw some of the students just climb up to some different floor, and she wanted them to come down, to for the whatever the kabaddi or the langdi or whatever that was happening. She's like, "Kute gele tumhi? Khali या लवड्यांनो?" and we are and we are standing there. I'm probably in class 8 or something, and that hit me, man. I was like, wow, this is like a no holds barred thing, yeah. I love my school for these reasons. It was not one of those hoity-toity, oh my god, this is how we speak. We weren't that. We were relatively like, like in Jo Jita Wahi Sikandar, you have model college, Rajput college. So we're like that model college, students. So we learned the street lingo, maybe. We learned all that. So for me, a lot of my Marathi Shivya, it goes back to my school days, where my Marathi medium friends used to, talk in particular, describe particular things in a very, very creative, expletive, loaded way. So I
Mhm.
think I remember that, and most of these shivya that I put in my comics are probably a callback to that. I'd say if this woman was there on the streets, she would not say "Arey sale idhar aa," and all. She'll probably go all out in Marathi and do it. Here's the fun part: when we go to the Bangalore Comic Con or Delhi Comic Con, we've even done Dubai and Singapore Comic Cons. People just flip through the book, and when they just come across these words, they actually come up to me and say, "Iska kya matlab hai?" I and I then I have a tough time explaining. That's actually a bad word. No, but what does it mean? And that's when I really go educational with them. That's where the
Mhm.
educational part of this podcast also comes in, where I start explaining to them, roughly what it means. So the usual one they ask me is, "Kaire melia tuja maila." What does that mean? And they can't pronounce it the way, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, "Kaire melia," tuja mai. So I'm like, wait, so that means I just try to put like 2-3 words together and say this is what it means, but it really doesn't have any meaning. It's just a phrase that's used. And somehow, Maushi has become popular even in non-Marathi speaking cities.
Mhm.
Uh, Not because, I mean, they might not understand the Marathiness of it, but probably because it's very different. It's a very different take on the entire superhero scene. Maybe she's not wearing spandex. She's not wearing, or these. objectifying female superhero clothes, which I strongly am against. The way they draw female superheroes in the Western comics, at least till the early 2000s, where they actually look like bikinis, fighting crime
Mhm.
in bikinis. That's ridiculous. So I think something about Maushi has worked. Besides the fact that yes, it's highly local, but even the Marathi expletives they've caught up on. A lot
Yeah.
of times, non-Marathi speaking cities, when they get people come up to me and say, "Hey, kaya re melia," and I'm like, I hope he doesn't mean that to me. I hope he's just repeating something he likes from the comic. But yeah, it's picked up. So I think that lingo is pretty much based on things I've heard around me. And my school, that school teacher, that PT teacher of mine, there was an epic way of calling students. Kaya re lauda no khaliya, and I was like, wow, that's education.
I just wanted to add a story to it. It's not as explicit, but it's pretty disgusting. So I'm gonna ask you to brace yourself and
Okay,
everybody listening.
okay,
So this was a saying I was introduced to in the seventh grade, which is, to be honest, pretty late from in where I'm from. I went to school in a village,
okay,
and I don't want to dox myself, so I'm not gonna tell you which one.
okay.
But on the cricket field, there was this guy who was acting like he's the boss. He was the best player for the district, not district, taluka team,
Sure.
and he got, yeah, everybody was hyping him up, and he got out on the first ball. And then the moment he got back, the dude who was his friend was like Hagla, and his other friend was like Patar. For people who don't speak Marathi, he got out, and then they were like, "You shat it, no?" And he was like, "He shat diluted," which doesn't sound as funny in
It
English,
doesn't.
but
It does. Marathi, it's perfect.
and
we
I
had a we had another way of explaining how a tough paper was, in the exams. Kadak pav patal bhaji. Kadak pav patal bhaji, and we used to wink. So that patal bhaji obviously was something else patal, not the bhaji. But I know
yeah.
exactly what you mean, man. I mean, these are things that kind of shape our sense of humor, I guess, when it comes to the local lingo.
Hmm.
And I've heard such ridiculous things, man. अरे अभी कुठे जातोयस रे तू? And there's the other guy, तुला काय करायचं? तो जातोय म्हशीच्या फोद्यात. I'm like, ये कहाँ से आ गया? Wow. I would never see life the same way ever again.
I have to recover from that. Um, like where does a normal conversation go?
I have no
Somewhere
idea.
important, bestiality.
Or the म्हशीच्या फोद्यात.
And one last thing that I have to discuss about this comic book is, of course,
Yeah.
you brought it up, is the fact that it doesn't cater to the male gaze.
Yeah.
I realize that that's a deliberate choice. I want to ask if that's a choice that you consistently made over through the comic books because you got tired of the trope,
Mm-hmm.
or is is it independent of the trope? Is it a response to the trope in general?
Not consciously, but it ended up that way. I didn't want to
Okay.
make a statement ki mere ko I want to make a female superhero who's not objectified. I didn't consciously want to do that. But the way the story started building up, and I said, you know what, she becomes, like I said, a vigilante, an
Mhm.
auntie. So I said, yeah, I mean, and for some very strange reason, even before I consciously realized it, I had a lot of people asking me. They have these quick press releases before Comic Cons, and they ask the artists, you're launching a comic book, so what were your thoughts, etc., etc. And a lot of people themselves ask, this superhero of yours doesn't wear spandex. Is that your statement against objectifying the female superhero? And I thought to myself, yes, it worked that way. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't consciously make her wear this because I wanted to go against that message. But I got encouraged by the fact that people are noticing it, and I got
Mhm.
encouraged by the fact that it is working that way. She's a heroine who breaks all the typical stereotypes. If you look at the 90s Fantastic Four, 90s or early 2000s, Sue Storm was wearing literally like almost a two-piece bikini, and she had like four here on her chest, which was like an open hole. You could see her cleavage.
Mhm.
It was completely there to have
Sexualize the
yeah,
character.
sexualize the character, have your male readers pick up the issues more. Image Comics used to do a lot of that. They in fact had swimsuit specials, can you imagine a swimsuit special for a Marvel heroines gallery where they're all wearing swimsuits, etc., etc. And these are superheroines, they're supposed to fight crime.
Mhm.
I also saw certain people on the internet draw male superheroes wearing these tight, beach shorts, your beach wear and trying to fight crime. It looks ridiculous. So why should a woman look like that? So for me,
Mhm.
Angry Maushi definitely stands against that trope, and it breaks that stereotype. And much before I could consciously do it and realize it, I'm glad that people saw it and they said that it's working this way, so that's a good thing. So I was pretty happy that it worked whichever way it went. Not that I
Okay.
consciously tried it, but it worked out that way.
Cool. One last thing is, well, if you have anything that you want to plug or tell our audiences, this is your time. Completely unprompted. Say whatever you want.
Awesome. So yeah, I think Indian comics. There's a lot today to explore, especially on the indie scene. For us, KiniStudios.com is where you can head. KiniStudios.com/comics. That's where we have the hard copies of the comics as well as the e-comic versions of each individual issue. The e-comics are listed at $50 each. That's really cheap. That's like half the price of the printed copy, and you can pay and download and read and support the indie scene, because we would love more and more people to read these comics and enjoy what the stories we have to tell. So again, just to repeat, KiniStudios.com/comics is what I would want to plug in, and you can follow all the social media handles on the website that you'll see right on top.
Okay. And on my concluding thoughts, Nawari Sadi OP. So,
Yes.
alright, that's all I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I'm sorry for the delay in delivering this episode, even though it was recorded a lot before it was released. And if you like the content and you're on YouTube watching this, please hit subscribe and leave a like. If you're not on YouTube and listening to this on Spotify or Google Podcasts or one of those platforms where this podcast is available on, please consider going to YouTube and subscribing to this channel. It really helps out a lot. If you really like the content that we're making, I have a Patreon link in the description which you can contribute to the podcast with. Did I make that sentence right? I hope so. Uh, if not, I'm just gonna list it out: www.patreon.com/deepfriedneurons, and you can support this podcast in whatever capacity you want. And that's it. Have a safe day. Bye.